Welcome to Roll to Save, the RPG history podcast, Miniature Wargaming.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Roll to Save. It's been a while since we've done one. I'm going to blame that on summer holidays and, in my case, associated documentation shenanigans. I have with me, as usual, Jason and Steve, and we are taking a slightly different tact today because we're going to talk about a bastard cousin to RPGs, which is miniature wargaming. They're both kind of if we did a Venn diagram of geeky interests, there'd be an enormous big circle in the centre of where miniature wargaming and role-playing meets. But before we get into that, gentlemen, how are you doing? Jason, how are you coping with the heat wave that is blistering Europe at the moment?
I'm melting. It's horrible. Ireland has recorded its hottest ever August day for the second day in a row, and it's just getting hotter. They're talking about it being hotter even still. So we're supposed to get some thunderstorms tonight. I'm hugely looking forward to that. Otherwise, this is going to be this puddle of Jason in this chair, which is not going to be pleasant for anybody.
That's a horrible image.
It is, isn't it?
The term puddle of Jason.
Sand check for you, boys.
And he's probably complaining about like 80 degrees, Fahrenheit or something over there is being sweltering.
What's that in real measurements?
Yeah, come on, Steve. Use proper money.
Yeah, proper money.
Type in Google. How do you...
But all frantically typing into Google to try and convert
It's
Fahrenheit.
something convenient, like you subtract 32 and divide it by 1.8, and then you get the answer.
That's 26.66 repeating.
It's okay, so it's hotter than that. It's roughly 30 degrees here at the moment. So
Nothing.
Celsius, that is.
30
so
degrees here, Celsius in Utah. But I've got air conditioning. And no humidity. So.
We have all the humidity and no air conditioning. So
my wife was actually over there in the UK for a couple of weeks without me. She was on holiday for much longer than me. Sadly, she gets a break from me and she gets to go on holiday. But she was telling me it was like 39 degrees, to which I kind of cheekily remarked, "Oh, well, it's 39 degrees here today in Utah." And she's like, "Yeah, but you've got air conditioning." She says, "How about you turn off the aircon, tip a bucket of water over you, and you'll get the same experience." Anyway, Steve, how are things in sunny Texas? Are you being humidified to death at the moment, or?
It's probably sub 100 right now. I was actually getting a little bit milder. It's only 83 degrees right now, which is about the same temperature it is for Jay right now.
Yeah, but you're in Texas. I expect 30 degrees in Texas. I don't expect it in Ireland.
It's 40 degrees Celsius over here. That it has been its high, one of its higher levels consistently for a week or two in the end. So
basically, stop whinging is what you're telling me.
I would never say that to the venerable member of the podcast.
Are we doing a podcast?
Yes.
It's a genuine concern for Jason, though, because you always see these things when it gets too hot or too cold for people over a certain age bracket. You're like, ooh, another bad winter, and Jason might not be with us.
Well, we've done this for 3 years, man. You might have a vacancy next year.
It's weird. It's almost like the climate's changing. I think that's what the word might be.
Filthy rumor.
Anyway, what gaming are you guys up to at the moment?
As I said, I'm always just doing D&D 5th edition at the moment. It just seems to be everywhere. That's all I seem to be doing. Recently, one of them kind of came to an end. We've just finished, is it Storm Giant King's Thunder or something? I think one of the adventure arcs for D&D 5e. That was quite good. So that's the first time I think I've ever finished an actual adventure arc in 5e, and it's been really good fun. So shout out to David Bartley for running that for us and putting up with us for quite so long. And in fact, we're going to have a little get together on Tuesday, try and find out what we're going to do. Whether he wants kind of a little bit of a break. He has been running a game for quite a long time now, so we're going to have a chat and see what we're going to do. So with a bit of luck, it might not be 5th edition, which means the next time you ask me that question, I might have something more interesting to tell you.
Excellent. Well done in finishing the adventure.
I know.
That's quite an
12th level as well. It's like, that's quite serious.
Wow. What were you playing? What horrible munchkin?
Right. Well, you
Minimaxing.
So, what race would you guess, Ian?
You'd probably be a half-elf or something.
No, I see. Tiefling.
A tiefling.
Of course, right? A tiefling. I was playing a tiefling bard of the College of Whispers, which has turned out to be one of the less useful colleges in the game we were playing. But it has got some really good role-playing aspects.
Did you have a long leather trench coat?
I could have had. No, I didn't. Yeah. I could have had, but I didn't.
Since it's been a hot minute since we did the last episode, I think since then I started my first in-person D&D or any role-playing game in the last 3, 4, or 5 years at work of all places, which has been really nice. Playing with a bunch of co-workers, a conference room, it brings back memories of the old days for that. And but that's been a lot of fun. I've been playing 5th edition as well. Homebrew campaign that a guy at work's running, and I'm playing an Oath of Vengeance Paladin, which is
the best type. Utterly the best type.
Pretty overpowered, not gonna lie. So that's been fun.
Brutal.
Yes, that's been fun to get back into that, and I've never played a Paladin before. And other than that, just our ongoing vampire game on and off, and whatever random video games that happen to strike my fancy.
Excellent. It's funny what you say about the co-worker thing, because there's a Slack channel at our place that is called D&D, and somebody posted in that saying, hey, I really want to run a game. Who'd like to play? So I have agreed. We had an inaugural meeting the other day. It was very nice to meet colleagues who share a similar interest, and he's going to run a one-shot just to see if everyone likes it, and then we're going to hopefully start a campaign. And this will amuse you, Steve. My character, I'm going to be playing a fighter because I'm full of imagination and way too lazy to learn the rules for any of these complicated classes that actually do good stuff. So I'll be playing some dull lug with a sword.
Which is... I really don't understand that, having roleplay with you about vampires and stuff like, but it does seem to be your thing. I'd have thought you'd at least be the pontificating cleric. That would be probably right up your street too. Having seen you dressed as a nun once, which was very disturbing.
You have. And,
I have.
Also, to make it equally disturbing, Jason was dressed as a nun.
There were 3 of us. Who was the third? That's the guy I can't remember.
There's only 2 nuns.
I'm pretty sure there was 3. Anyway, maybe I just imagined the third one. But just to add, I actually got myself back to the UK the other week, and I actually met my Monday nights group in person as well. So that was a bit of a thing. So I went around a friend's house and sat around a table. Interestingly, of course, we still didn't have any dice, and we still didn't have any miniatures, and we still ended up using the Roll20 app on our phones, which actually works quite well. But the thing is, because none of us have got character sheets for these characters, because we did them all electronically in Roll20, and it's now, well, what do? We can print them, but that seems awkward. But yeah, Roll20 app, very good.
I found that with D&D Beyond as well. That is a fantastic app for... people like to bash wizards, and they like to, because it's a popular thing, but D&D Beyond is just an amazing tool. The only problem I find with it is that rabbit hole you can go down of, I might make another character, just see what that looks like, and play about with these numbers. And
it's 1,000 different variances of the same character, yeah.
It's like, here's a different fighter. This guy uses a hammer. Well, that is good to hear that you're doing it in person. That sounds foul, but you're playing games in person now, Steve. That's what I'm trying to say. Let's not think about Steve doing it in person. It's not an R-rated podcast. But I think there's more groups getting back to face-to-face gaming, which is nice, because there are certain games I think that are way more suited to face-to-face than there are online. Online's great for a lot of stuff, but I do love just the camaraderie of getting people around the table and chucking some dice.
And drinking some wine.
But we are going to be talking about something different today. We're going to talk about miniature wargaming. And as I mentioned at the beginning, miniature wargaming and RPGs generally go hand in hand. In fact, you look at the history of RPGs, it's essentially where RPGs sprung from, is miniature wargaming. And most people who do RPGs also have at some point, or still do, play miniature wargames. And one of the reasons it's really prompted this is there's been a couple of events recently in the miniature wargaming world that kind of piqued our interest. And I think similar to RPGs, mini wargaming is going through a bit of a renaissance at the moment, with new games coming out, new popularity. But the ones that kind of piqued our interest were Games Workshop have released their Horus Heresy set for Warhammer 40,000, which is a different take on that game, different background, which we'll get into. And also Privateer Press, who produce War Machine and Hordes, they have announced a fourth edition of their game, they were previously on the third edition and have been fairly silent for a few years, and they've come forward and said that they're going to do a fourth edition. So this has prompted us to take a little look into our experiences with mini wargaming and what we think the future holds. But Jason, I'll start with you because you're the oldest, obviously.
This will take longer.
Your experience? Yeah, it'll take longer. Yes, a long and storied history. What's your saga with mini wargaming? How did you get involved with it?
Longer than my history with role playing. So I've done all kinds of miniature wargaming. I remember doing 1/300 scale ultra modern, 25mm Napoleonics, 15mm ancients. I remember doing 1/3000 scale naval battles, World War II naval battles, all that kind of stuff. And actually started that. It was actually going to a club to do wargaming back in the very early 80s, like maybe 80. And that's when I got sidelined by a guy who said he wanted to run a role-playing game and ended up playing AD&D as my first ever. And I was a big lunk of a fighter, by the way, just out of, solidarity.
Man of taste.
I died horribly quite quickly, but never mind. And then obviously I've moved on since then. I role-playing kind of took over, but I subsequently kind of got into, loved Warhammer 40,000 when it first came out. I've still got a few squads of the little original Space Womble Space Marines with the pointy noses, which are making a return, so I see. Okay, so I'm more up to date. I'm so cool. I was there the first time these things went round. But I'm now up to date again. If you wait long enough, it eventually happens. So 40k.
It's almost like they're hitting that nostalgia button.
It is, isn't it? Wow, that's our thing, isn't it? Yeah. And I also had a small Eldar force that I'd started to collect, but actually was more interested in just painting those. So there was a couple of little Eldar miniatures I spent ages painting. They were like the pinnacle of my painting career, which has since dropped off, as I'm sure you'll comment on later, Ian. I think it's the eyes. They go with age. I can't help it.
He's so disparaging. Jason is actually a very good painter.
He's
we
not.
obviously can't show you because we're a podcast,
he's not.
But he is actually
tabletop
very good at painting.
Tabletop standard. I'm not going to win any golden demons here, all right? But I put it on the table. It looks okay. But yeah, more recently, all your fault, War Machine. Ian has this habit of coming to me every now and again going, I want to play X. Here's a starter set. It won't cost you anything to play, Jason. And then before I know it, I've got a collection that's literally bursting out of boxes and, display cabinets and things like that because, I just got one of those kind of addictive personalities that once I play something and I like it. I think the first thing you did that to me was Vitesse, so Vampire the Eternal Struggle card game. I know we're not talking about card games, but here's a starter set, Jay, and before you knew it, I had thousands of cards. And then there was War Machine was the last one where it's like, here, I've bought you this cult of religious fanatics who play with fire. You'll like these guys.
That was a birthday present, you'll find.
It was a birthday present, and a very much appreciated birthday present that has cost me a fortune. But so the fourth edition announcement really interests me. I want to know what's going on. I did have the feeling before fourth edition that War Machine was on the slide. The Privateer Press weren't giving it the focus it deserved. They had this new Warcaster Neo Mechanica thing going on and hero questing and stuff like that. Was it not Hero Quest? What was the word?
Riot Quest.
Riot Quest. Thank you. Hero Quest is GW, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Riot Quest stuff. So Hordes and War Machine wasn't getting a lot of love in, and I found that quite dispiriting. So I'm really interested that they've done a fourth edition launch. How successful it'll be, I guess we'll find out.
And Steve, what about you? We know that you now blur your background so we can't see your massive pile of painting shame behind you, but...
That's why he does it.
It's more my office is terribly messy. And, I like to have something less shame. But no, actually, I've moved most of my miniatures downstairs recently. Most of my painting stuff's downstairs. But yeah, no, and I have my doors closed, so you can't see my closet full of gray plastic shame. But yeah, I mean, similar to Jay, 40k was kind of... Games Workshop was where I started, really down that road. There was a local Games Workshop in Edinburgh that was in the High Street. It was still there, that same location, up until only a couple of years ago, which was quite shocking. And they're still in Edinburgh. They just moved. So spent more than a few times up there in my wee tweens and onwards, playing random GW games and spending whatever little pocket money I had there. I also had the Beaky Marines. Those were also my first set. Or Womble. I've never heard the term Womble Marines, but that's great. I love that.
Space Wombles.
Yes, I love Space Wombles. That's great. I guess I've been in America too much. It didn't click. But yeah, Beakies, as they're also affectionately known as, I have a special place. So having them come back has been a very nostalgic kick. And I played almost all of their games. Classic Warhammer, I played a ton of that in high school. I played the Empire and that. Played Blood Bowl, always played a human team, played Space Hulk, always got to play the Space Marines. I always have this theme of playing like the most vanilla human boring faction. I've kind of branched out a little bit over the years. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, minis have always been fascinating with a variety of different games like Hero Quest, and we'll get into all that. Like, played a bunch of Hero Quest and Space Crusade, all the MB, GW licensed games. And basically, any board game that has miniatures in it, I'm a complete sucker for, even till this day. And let's not even start about Kickstarters. I'm sure that's a topic we'll get into later. But yeah, I've been on and off for years buying random crap. GW. I branched out into other, Atomic Mass, Fantasy Flight, all sorts of random stuff, and always with a theme of, hey, this sounds like a great starter set. Oh wait, I actually have to put time into putting this stuff together. It's gonna sit on a shelf now. I paint as well. I'm not a very good painter. I'll never claim to be more than average at best. And it's a very relaxing hobby, but it's also very time consuming for me.
I'm similar to you guys. I actually know when I started, but I was very into fighting fantasy books, as we've talked about before. And they used to do a magazine called Warlock. And there was an advertisement in one of them for a set called the Skeleton Horde. And it was this just set of skeletal models, and it had a little profile said for use in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And I was like, ooh, what's this? And me and my family were down in Hull in 1986, and for international listeners, of which we have many, I'm sure, Hull is this port on the east coast of England. I was in there for something vaguely to do with my dad's work, I think. And we were going round, I think my mum took me and my sister around some toy shops to keep us amused, because there's not a great deal to do in Hull, unless you're a sailor and want to go and fight in the street.
Way to alienate our Hull listeners.
Yeah, for all those Hull listeners out there, I apologise. I'm going on my one and only experience of Hull. Yeah, we went to this toy shop and they had this Skeleton Horde box set, and I just knew, I was like, I'll have to have this. I saw this in Warlock magazine, and I thought it had something vaguely to do with fighting fantasy. But I bought this set. It's like 24 plastic skeletons, and got some polystyrene cement and put these guys together. I'm like, now what do I do with them? Oh, you can paint them. But they had these rules for Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So for my birthday that year, I asked for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and that was second edition, so this would be mid-80s. And I got really into Warhammer Fantasy Battle. I collected an undead army, obviously, a chaos army. I was awful at painting. I was so bad at painting. I read all these articles in White Dwarf magazine about how to do things like blend your paints, and everything just ended up brown. I just had this legion of brown, to the extent that I was like, okay, this is a Nurgle Chaos Legion. Look at all the brown. I got really into that. Then Warhammer 40,000 came out around about the same time as Warhammer Fantasy Battle Third Ed as well. And Third Ed I absolutely loved. There was a lot of really good stuff for that, like the Realms of Chaos books. 40k, like you guys, I got the Beaky Marines straight away. Again, fantastic value. I think it was £10 and you got 20 plus Marines that you could glue together and paint brown if you wanted. And I collected a Space Marine army for that and really get into it. There was a load of people locally that played. We played Blood Bowl as well. One guy was really into Blood Bowl, so of course we all collected teams for that. I had a Dark Elf team for Blood Bowl. They were fun to paint. They ended up purple rather than brown. I think round about when I get really back into RPGs in the mid-90s, I just lost interest in mini wargaming, especially because Warhammer Fantasy Battle 4th edition came out, and it was a complete change, both of aesthetic and of pace. They tried to simplify a lot of stuff, which in fairness is probably for the better, because Third Ed was very complicated, but it felt a bit like dumbing down. They were adding more kind of really high fantasy elements to it, and I really lost interest in it. And I remember flash forward till about 2006, and we were about to have our first kid, and I found this big box of like Warhammer minis. I had Warhammer 40,000 minis, Warhammer Fantasy minis, and I was like, I'm just going to chuck them. I'm never going to play this again. So I threw them in the bin.
No.
Fast forward another 8 years, and I was looking after the kids when my wife was away, and we went past the Games Workshop, and my daughter was like, oh, these things look cool, can we go in there? And went in there, and the slow slide into buying plastic crap began again, because she got really into it, and she was an amazing painter. She's won prizes. She's actually just walked past me here, throwing up fours, as I believe the kids say today, about how swag she is, as she's just said. But she won prizes for painting, not just in kids categories. She won prizes in adult categories for painting, which was always kind of embarrassing when you put your stuff up against it. You're like, hey, look at my stuff. And like, wow, that's really good. And then my 9-year-old painted those. Sorry, that wasn't me.
I owe her a debt of thanks, actually, as well. And I don't mind admitting this, is because painting my War Machine army, there's a lot of fire involved. And I remember she did a really cool Phoenix for her Elven army. And I actually got painting hints and tips from Ian's daughter.
Yeah, she was 10 at the time.
She was 10, yeah, exactly. And I still use them. It was some of the best painting tips I had from a 10-year-old. So it was, pretty impressive stuff.
She is insanely good at painting. She's too cool for it now, but
you need to put her to work, man. You need to put her to work.
Well, when I was putting my display cabinet up, she's like, why aren't my miniatures in there? They're the best ones in the house. I'm like, that's a fair point. I'll put them in there, and then I'll claim I painted them. I got really back into 8th Ed Warhammer Fantasy Battle, it was at the time. Collected a massive Skaven army, painted them all because, as everyone knows,
sure, masochist,
magnetized them as well, because when you play a Skaven army, I was literally fielding 2 units of like 100 Skaven slaves, and it's a lot easier to magnetize them and put them in a tray than it is to individually set up all these individual little guys. Did all that, and then Games Workshop went and killed Warhammer Fantasy Battle and replaced it with Age of Sigmar. And I'm not
incoming rant.
No, I'm not going to rant, but I am still horrendously bitter about that to this day.
You're properly scarred by that.
At the time, and we'll get into this later, the way GW did it wasn't great. And I know they've done lots of good things with it since, but I cannot bear to bring myself to play that game for what they did. So after they did that, as Jason mentioned earlier, I was looking for a new game, and I'd heard great things about Privateer Press's War Machine. So I was like, well, I need people to play this with me. So I basically did the old drug dealer routine in Jason in the guise of a birthday present. And the funniest thing is Jason said, oh, it sounds fun. I'll probably play a few games, but I'll never paint them probably. Of course you won't. And he's now got a display cabinet full of beautiful painted miniatures.
Nothing gets fielded if it's unpainted. It's not happening.
Exactly. It's the law. It's the law.
My law. I don't care what anybody else does.
It's my law as well. Yeah. I cannot bear to field unpainted miniatures. But I also, to get some interest up in a local gaming group, we had done for Warhammer Fantasy Battle an escalation league where you play with differing points values every week and it slowly gets bigger and bigger. Well, Privateer Press, I found out, had an official programme where you did what was called a journeyman league, and it was to get people into the hobby and effectively buying models, where you would start off playing with the starter box, then a few weeks later you'd add in maybe another model, then another couple, and you get points for winning battles, you get points for painting miniatures, and at the end of the season there were official prizes that you could get. And that was a great little league. We got a fantastic community going of people playing, both experienced players and people who'd never played before, and it really encouraged a frenzy of painting amongst people. It was great seeing people turning up every week with new miniatures. I think around about the same time I also got back into 40k as well. They were doing some Horus Heresy stuff. I just always loved 40k. I love the aesthetic. I love what the models look like. And then went on a bit of a hiatus after I moved to the States. I played War Machine for a little while with other friend Jason over here. who I also get into War Machine in a very similar
I got
fashion.
replaced.
Yeah, you get replaced with another Jason.
Yeah.
But he was equally susceptible to here's a starter box, you don't have to buy anything else.
Must be something to do, it must be in our personalities, deep-rooted psychological issues or something.
I should really find a job in Colombia. I'm sure there's an industry there that crying out for my talent.
You left Glasgow behind. Sorry, all our listeners from Glasgow. I'm not counting this back.
The other week when my wife was on holiday, I thought, I'm going to paint some stuff because I'm sad and lonely on my own. And I was utterly ashamed at the amount of unpainted stuff I had lying around, just piles of grey plastic that was waiting to be painted. So that's where I'm at. But to sort of bring this full circle, as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the reasons we're talking about this is because of these kind of two announcements in the community. One is that Games Workshop are producing this Horus Heresy set. It's not straight Warhammer 40k, it's a different setting. It's Warhammer 30k, in fact, and it uses an older rule set, of which they've already got an established community around, and they're releasing new models for it. But also Privateer Press are releasing this 4th edition of War Machine. I know, Jason, you've got some opinions on the War Machine side of things. What do you think is the reason for doing this?
I don't think it's that difficult. It's obviously sales. War Machine is a fantastic game. I really enjoy War Machine. It is, but it has an extremely steep learning curve. I can't remember how many games I played before I actually won a game. It was really, but I'm just stubborn, so I just don't give up very often. But, how many times did we play and your filthy swans would walk over my righteous Menoth and I'd be,
Traitors is the word you're looking for.
Righteous, I think. Righteous, yes. Yeah, so it's a very steep learning curve, and there's a lot of models. There's a lot of factions, a lot of models in each faction. It's quite intimidating to start. And I get it. I mean, you need two things for a game to survive. You need people to play it. That's the first and main one, because obviously then they're going to buy the miniatures. But you need to keep that interest. So you need to keep it alive. And as I said, I thought Privateer Press kind of dropped the ball a little bit and were busy looking at their new shinies, like Neo Mechanica and things like that, and took their eye off the ball. So they've kind of come up with this idea where they're going to split the rule set and do a prime rule set with a limited set of models and a legacy rule set where you can use pretty much anything you want. It's a risky play because, you've got a bunch of old timers like us who have got massive armies and collections, multiple armies potentially. And all of a sudden you haven't quite pulled an Age of Sigmar where they've all got to go in the bin, but you've told people that they may not be relevant anymore. Not only have you just destroyed any resale value of passing them on, because who's going to buy them, but you've probably alienated a few people. On the other hand, you've probably made it easier to get new blood into the game, and you do need new blood to survive. I'm curious to see how it works out. I mean, I've only got the one army. Admittedly, I've got everything in that army, but I do only have the one army, and it is one of the factions that has already been slated as staying in the prime rule set, so I'm probably not too badly affected by the kind of forced redundancy of some models. But I know some people who have got so many armies and they're looking at it going, none of my armies are in that list. Now that's the first list. The intention is that there'll be more factions come on stream later, but I can see it. It's like, as you said, you were alienated by GW's move for Age of Sigmar. Is this Privateers Press Age of Sigmar moment? I hope not, because I'd like to carry on playing it, please.
I mean, to be fair, let's set the record straight on the GW stuff, because I'm by no means an apologist, but let's be accurate here. They did not retire the armies. A couple of the armies, yes, for the most part, due to lore, but the vast majority of them, you could continue to use them. They even provided rules for every single army. I'm not going to say that we're competitive in a lot of cases, but the vast majority, probably 80 or 90% of the old range is still perfectly valid to play in Age of Sigmar right now.
I only have Iain's propaganda to go on, right? He tells me, he lies to me, whispers in my ear at night and tells me how evil they are and how they destroyed his game.
You don't talk about our private moments like that, Jason.
There are two significant asterisks about this, right? One, they switched the bases, so you had to go from square bases to round bases, which did irritate a lot of the fans, legitimately so, right? That is a pain in the butt and a barrier for entry because you can't necessarily play both games at that point. So that irritated people. And the second, the game is a very, very different game than old school Warhammer Fantasy Battle. I actually think it's at least as good, if not better, in some ways. Right? I really enjoy it, and I'm probably the only one on this call who's actually played it to any degree.
I heard it have improved a lot.
It's streamlined. It's more balanced than 40k. I'm not gonna fanboy over it. I like it a lot. The lore is really goofy, and I'm gonna get off my soapbox. The lore, Ian, don't get Ian started on the lore. I will agree with Ian. The lore is a little goofy compared to old school, because I prefer the old Warhammer Fantasy Battle lore for the most part. Absolutely, and we'll get into where GW is going with that next in a little bit, I'm sure. But just to set the record straight with Age of Sigmar versus Warhammer, you did not lose all your armies. There were the two significant ones that people are still urging to this day. The Tomb Kings, which were a very niche faction in a lot of ways, but the people who like Tomb Kings love Tomb Kings, right? Absolutely love Tomb Kings. And the second were the Bretonnians, same thing. Very niche faction. People who love Bretonnians really loved them. And they got turned into, basically in the lore, these flesh-eating zombies was the lore. Is there not, like... That's kind of what they've translated. So completely new range. Definitely, it's a very different game, but the vast majority of minis are still playable. They just have slightly different lore attached to them.
So I'd say with Age of Sigmar, and putting all bias aside...
Yeah, right.
With Age of Sigmar, when the rules first came out, that is probably what irritated me most. It's not the fact it was a new game. I actually quite liked the ending to Warhammer Fantasy Battle. I thought the end times, it was actually, the words of Dodgeball, it was a bold move, Cotton, but it was quite a cool story, quite badly written in points, but quite a cool story nonetheless. It was a change in game. I like the Fantasy Battle, moving large blocks of troops around the place and wheeling and doing formations, and the fact you can't just move every model, they have to march in lockstep. And the initial rules of Age of Sigmar, when it came out on like two sides of A4 or whatever it was, and it was essentially like a kid smashing two cars into each other, and they're like, yeah, you can just use whatever you want, there's no points value. And I was like, what the hell is this? And it just was dire. And I understand they've changed it massively since then, because I think they realised probably through the wonderful world of sales that it was indeed dire. But that and the new aesthetic, when I saw those Stormcast models, I was like, oh, so Blood Angels from 40k, that's what we're calling fantasy. And the lore, as you mentioned, it's like something like a Saturday morning cartoon. If He-Man rocked up in Age of Sigmar, it would not surprise me. But I think my point about the miniatures being invalidated is much more the fact that your existing armies were not competitive. I know there's some figures that you can still use in the new edition, and I've seen box sets that they sell that have what look like older minis. I know you can still buy like the Skaven Screaming Bell, for instance. But the fact that when those initial rules came out and they had all this, for those of you who don't know, they made humorous rules for models, where there's things like, if you've got a moustache and you play this model, you get this bonus, or if you kid on to talk to your horse, you get another. What the hell is this nonsense? So that felt like a bit of a slap in the face to established gamers. And I know some people went completely off the edge. Like, there was one guy who set light to his army on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, that's a bit asinine. I don't think I'd go that far. I'll choose not to play it, but I'm not going to go and burn my collection. But I think to Jason's point, what Privateer Press have said is they're going to be releasing two formats. There's going to be Prime, which is the competitive format, and that's actually quite an important point, because War Machine has always been a competitive game. It's a game for competitions. They've always had a very good competitive scene, but it's a competitive scene where you've got a tight set of rules. Things are meant to be balanced, and if you get two people of equal skill, it's going to be a great contest, and you decide who wins it that way. And that format is only going to be for the new models they're releasing and certain legacy models, not all legacy models. So they're apparently curating some groups of legacy models, but also the caveat is those legacy models are not going to get updated. So they are as they are now. And I think the subtext there is they're not going to be as good as the new stuff. they're also going to have an unlimited format where you can just play anything. They're eventually going to release rules for everything they've ever released, and you can just play anything you want. The concerns I'm seeing online, I'm part of various groups where people are discussing this, and it's actually really hard to get quite a neutral opinion, because on one hand you've got people who love privateer press, like nothing they can do is ever bad, and then you've got the other people who are just doomslayers, like everything's going to be terrible, and it's trying to find that even ground between the two. But one of the sort of legitimate concerns seems to be this unlimited format is probably going to become a bit of a free-for-all, and because it's not competitive, how many of the old school people who played War Machine for the competitive side of things are going to carry on playing that, and therefore how legitimised are their models? And the problem is nobody's seen the rules for that yet, so nobody can answer that. So there's a lot of hearsay kicking about. And as Jason says, I think it's a good move for Privateer. I personally thought for the last couple of years, I think they've killed War Machine. They released this new game called Warcaster Neo Mechanica, which kind of, I don't want to say flopped because I know people play it, but you can find literally, if you go into YouTube and look for actual plays or anything like that, there's nothing. There doesn't seem to be any communities around it. Nobody seems to have been talking about it for the last couple of years. It kind of came out, people bought some models, and then they were like, oh, well, I guess that's that. And they were releasing models for this game, Riot Quest, which they were making compatible with War Machine and Hordes, but they weren't really releasing anything new for the main game. So it felt a bit like it died. So the announcement of a new edition is great because it's like, cool, they're going to inject some blood and some life into this. And to be honest, I think they're in an impossible position. They did come out, and I didn't quite like the way they handled it because they made a few disparaging comparisons to Age of Sigmar without mentioning it, which I thought was a bit of an unprofessional, slightly cheap move. But it's a hard place that they're in. Like, do they just go, well, we're going to carry on making rules for everything, which feels the wrong choice, because one of the biggest problems is they've already got so many bloody models. As Jason said, the learning curve is so steep, and for you to try and learn how to play with this whole big back catalogue of old models, that might be too tricky. They don't want to just invalidate everything, so I think they're trying to find a middle ground between the two.
But I think they're doing it the wrong way. I don't understand. The bit I don't get about it is you're releasing a new Prime subset, right? It's fewer models, streamlined rules, easier to access, and you're making that your competitive go-to. Why would you not make that your beginner level, like the Journeyman League, right? Make that your beginner level and have multiple tiers of like sort of basic, expert, and whatever, Warcaster or whatever. So you can say, if you're new to the game, play with this small limited set of models, small limited set of rules, and then once you're confident, move up. And that way, people who are long-term War Machine fans, long-term players, can still play all of their stuff at the highest level with all of the rules, right? And you're not intimidating new players away. And you can do Steamroller tournaments, that's their format for a daily tournament, where you could actually state what level of rule set you were using, and therefore what subset of models you were using. It seems weird to me that the one you're pushing everybody to go to is the one with the smallest rule set and the smallest model set.
I think that's, though, as you mentioned, to get new people into it.
But if you could do that by having a Prime, War Machine Prime, and you have that as a basic set. War Machine Warcaster, have it as an advanced set, and let the rest of us who've got 4,000 tons of men sitting in a cabinet still field it if we want to.
But I think that's probably the reason, because one of the stated desires they've got is they were sunk by the fact they have this huge back catalogue of models, and distributors hated it because distributors didn't want to carry all this privateer press stock. There's also those production problems with things in China. The pandemic didn't help, but just getting stock of old models and carrying that many items is problematic for a business their size. Therefore, by having a smaller model set, they make the game easier for them to run and to make money from. I totally get your point, because one of the things I did want to come on to, and I'm really interested in what both of you think of this, because there's a lot of debate about this, is their starter set. Also, to put it in context, previously, if you wanted to start playing War Machine, they did these things called battle boxes. And you get a box, and inside would be a Warcaster, which was the main character that you'd be using, and a couple of Warjacks, which were the big smashy robots that made the setting so much fun. And you get the rules and some other fluff in there. And that was about $50 US. Now they're selling a bigger set. This is going to be the starter set. That is a box of models that comes with a Warcaster, a couple of Warjacks. They're magnetizing the arms on the Warjacks, so you get different options. You can, load them out differently. And then a couple of units of soldiers as well. But it's $200. If you're trying to get new people into the game, that's a hard sell. If you've never tried a game before, because this isn't a $200 set like with 40k where you can split between two people, have a little battle and see what you think. This is for one person.
That's not a starter set. That's far too high of an investment for a starter set. Like, if you're going to get people to play the game, you need to start them at a very low scale of investment, both from a money and complexity perspective. That sounds like a full army box almost, of like pro level one. That's like a, hey, I'm an experienced player, I want to try a new faction type box. I mean, GW has this, and I'm not going to derail from GW on this, I want to hear Jason's, but GW does a better job of this in some ways, in that you have a starter box, which is very low cost, small number of figures for two people. To your point, two people can split like a $50 box and learn the game without adding a lot of complexity, or they can go all the way up to that $200, $300 box that has almost two small armies, that you can go all the way up to that level if you're ready to jump in on that. So you have different levels to get people invested in. And if $200 for a War Machine starter box is your only option for a single player, no one's going to do that. Like, not for new players. Like, that's far too high of an investment in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to buy that as a random, here's your birthday present. Do you know what I mean? When Iain bought me my set, there was, as I said, one Warcaster, two Warjacks, and it was, I don't know how much it cost you, but let's call it $50, right? Because that's what you said earlier. That's, you're looking at per person $200, so you're looking at a $400 investment just to get a game. Right? Yeah. Not only that, is I had to learn one guy and two Warjacks worth of stuff to play my first game. Yeah. Right? You've now got to learn an entire army. As you rightly say, I think spot on, Steve, is the fact that that's I want to try a faction, let's buy a usable amount of that faction to play. But that's not an intro. That's me, who's played Menoth for years, who decides, actually, I fancy giving Kador a go this week. Bang, I can split, because I know I like the game. That bit isn't at risk. So $200 is, it's not an insignificant sum of money, but I know I like the game and I'm going to get something out of it. Whereas me, when Iain first turned on my doorstep, when there's this game called War Machine, I fancy playing it. It's going to cost you $200 to get into it.
Yeah.
No thanks.
That's
too much.
Here's an example of what the competition is doing that, like, I think people should learn from, and this is from a game company we haven't even talked about yet, but is one of the granddaddies of tabletop working, BattleTech. So Catalyst Games owns the license for that these days, long gone from FASA and so on, right? Or at least they have a license for it from whoever owns the license. Their latest beginner's box is a 2-player beginner box, has 2 miniatures in it. Concise, streamlined rules with basically rub-off pen sort of like sheets. Because you remember BattleTech, it's the sheets are very complicated. So simple version, there's that you can use like a pen on and rub off and wipe off. And even better, right? This is where $20 for this box set, 2 miniatures, and they come with card pawns with stands, so that you can basically expand your game to like a full lance on each player for $20. Yeah. With an introductory scenarios, maps, everything. That's a way to get players into a hobby.
I agree 100%. That's why I asked the question, because I've seen this and there's loads of people defending it, going, "Oh, it's really good value for money." But to me, the key is you're not targeting this at your existing player base. There are members of that player base, in fact, the ones usually defending it, are going to buy it regardless. You can make it $400 and they would go and buy it. But your stated intent is, our game was dying, we want to get new blood in. A $200 investment. You think of it, I'd give you the example of when I went past Games Workshop with my daughter when she was 8, and she's like, oh, those things look cool. I knew about Warhammer. And going in there and seeing the starter set and what was in it and the price point, I was like, to be honest, that's a justifiable, is probably not the right word, but it's a purchase you could live with. You'd be like, I'll take that. If she doesn't like it, I can sling it on eBay. War Machine is fairly niche. It's not a big player like Warhammer 40k. It's not a impulse buy. You're not going to go, oh, new game, $200. I'll give that a go. For Gen Con, Privateer released on their stand at Gen Con, but also online for a limited period, little boxes where you got 1 Warcaster and 2 Warjacks along with the weapon options for $75. And some people were like, oh my God, it used to be $50, now it's $75. Like, prices have changed, over a couple of years. Yes, I'm sure 2 arms aren't necessarily worth another $25, but $75 is a far cry from $200. And to your point, Steve, about the complexity, and to what Jason said about the original battle boxes, learning 1 Warcaster and 2 Warjacks is a lot simpler and an easier introduction into the game than learning 1 Warcaster, 2 Warjacks, multiple units. The other thing, and I think you mentioned it right near the beginning, Steve, is the assembly time. If you're brand new to the hobby, if you're brand new to this game, you want to get up and running quickly. You don't want to have to assemble 20 models. That takes a long time. I put together a whole bunch of Space Marines yesterday. It took me, a good few hours. You want to get home, open up the box, get the things together and play a game. And you're not going to do that with a massive $200 army box.
I can't remember how many games it was before I actually used infantry.
That was, with the Journeyman League, which again was an excellent format.
Great format.
We didn't use infantry until something like
week 3 or 4, probably.
Week 3 or 4, yeah.
Oh, and actually, we were doing it monthly, weren't we? So it was actually month 3 and 4. So there's plenty of time.
You were playing games with these, with just the basic set of models and learning the mechanics, and could not praise their support system for new players back then more highly. It was phenomenal.
And I'm shocked you tell me there's magnetized options in this set. Because to me, but okay, don't get me wrong, magnetizing is a great thing, but generally in the tabletop hobby, it's kind of like more and especially when you're building models, it's more of an advanced thing, right? For multiple reasons. One, it adds the complexity. Well, which one do I pick? 2, stuff gets lost easily, right? You want to, for me, when you're starting, you want to have minis with as least posing options as possible, because they're simpler to put together, and they stay together, and stuff's not going to step off. I mean, magnetized arms, they're just if you're not careful, they're just going to get lost. And it's just not a good way to get, especially kids. It's they're small pieces. What's worse, if an arm falls off and a kid or dog's going to eat the arm, it's less like they're going to eat a whole miniature, right? I don't know.
I don't know. I thought the magnetization was a good option but then I got to that point with my army anyway.
Yes.
So I've got numerous little Ziploc bags full of arms and weapons and different configurations, heads even, and to me it was like, oh, that's a really good thing, because you'd buy these kits. Every time you buy a heavy jack kit, you'd get 3 options in it generally, and you'd choose which one you wanted, or you'd get your little pin drill out and you'd drill it and you'd stick the little magnets in and then you click them on. But that was great.
That you just made my point, though.
Yeah.
You're the target audience for this box is a pro gamer who knows what they're doing,
Absolutely.
Who's at that level of their hobby and wants
right?
that flexibility, right?
Yeah.
It's not a starter option.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. I've seen some feedback online already where you've got people who are saying, about time it's magnetized, similar to what Jason's saying there. We have all these options. We want to be able to make multiple ones. And like Jason, I've just looked at my cabinet over there. I've got a bunch of Warjacks that I magnetize the arms on, because I'm I've paid $30 for this. I want to be able to use all 3 different options. I don't want to just be able to use one. And that's fine, because I know what I'm doing with that. However, I've seen some people online who have bought these things at Gen Con, and they're like, Oh, so what's polarity? Why are these not sticking on? And they've not included any instructions in the box as to how you actually use the magnets.
They might assume a basic level of physics. I don't know.
Yeah, but no, to me that's a massive misstep. That you should have something in there that says, by the way, here's a tip that anyone who's done it before is when you've separated these into pairs, paint one side of each one so you know red is this, blue is this, and then they work together. But
fancy that.
It's not a beginner's technique.
The weird thing I find is you're embracing magnetism, which I think is a good thing as a experienced gamer. And we've already discussed the pros and cons, but they're also embracing 3D printing. Right? Now, if you can do STLs and 3D printing, why do you need interchangeable kits? Print the kit you want.
But they're not giving the STLs to people, though, because that would be...
But they could.
No, that would be economic suicide for them.
You could paper print. You could do a paper print model or something like that. All I'm saying is, all of a sudden, you've got this situation where magnetization was even conceived because you had a kit with 3 warjacks and you wanted to use all 3, but you didn't. You can actually print the individual one, relatively simple, relatively easy. If it wasn't $45 for a heavy warjack or whatever it is, maybe you consider having more than one of a different type.
That's a nice segue into actually one of the other potentially controversial points of this new edition is that they've said that they're moving away from their old methods of manufacturing and they are going to use 3D printing. Now, as a bit of background to that, one of the things that Privateer were hit badly with in recent years was a lot of supply chain issues. I mean, COVID aside, even prior to that, there was a lot of difficulty getting this enormous catalogue of stock for distributors to carry it, especially in continental Europe. I think the UK was slightly different in that there was some sort of arrangement there with a distributor there. I can't remember the specifics, but...
Somebody in Liverpool, wasn't it, I think?
It was Liverpool, yeah. There was difficulty getting stock out. One of the things they're saying with this new wet method is we can now print everything. We can have printing places set up in the various markets where people want to buy it. It's going to be cheaper to produce. It's going to be easier to get out to people. And then there's various back and forth. Some people are like, great, this sounds fantastic. This sounds like the future. Other people are going, these things are going to be trash. Other people going, well, why are you not passing along the savings cost to us? Your models are more expensive now.
I would not pay a price anywhere near to an equivalent manufacturer that did plastic or even resin for a 3D print. No way. Like, the quality's not good. I mean, you can get good quality 3D print stuff, and I'm no expert on it by any means, but for like a retail company to do it as their entire model, like you'd have to give me a price point that made sense for that.
So do you think the technology is not mature enough?
I mean, that's a great question. I guess you get what you pay for. If they've got like serious, industrial level 3D printers, maybe you'll get to a reasonable quality. But would you be able to compare that favorably enough against proper plastic or even resin? And I'm not even a fan of resin, but like proper like plastic multi-part kits. Do you think you're going to get as good of a quality for that?
That's the trick. It's the quality question, isn't it? So, I've had a go at 3D printing. I was terrible at it. I did very badly. And you could tell it was 3D printed. You can see the lines, the layers, all that kind of stuff. But I've got friends of mine who are quite hot on 3D printing. One guy I know 3D prints prosthetics for kids who have limb deficiencies and things like that. And the stuff he's printing is absolutely superb. I used to know some guys worked in Formula One, and I've been around Formula One factories, and they have the big resin 3D printers, and they print models of the cars in 1/3 scale, and so to do aerodynamic testing. So it does depend, I think, heavily on the resolution of that print and what's happening. So, I joked, it said earlier about a paper print STL sale or something like that. Well, that's going to very much depend on what quality printer you've got sitting on your desk. But these guys, I'm assuming, are going to be partnering, I hope, with some good quality 3D print people. The good thing about it is, you're never going to have to wait for a Mini to come into stock again. How many times have you ordered something from, one of your friendly local gaming store, and you've had to wait 2 weeks for it to turn up or more? And particularly with Privateer presses, well-documented supply problems, that sometimes got to be an issue. Literally, you'd order it, and the next day you'd be able to pick it up. I'm interested to see it. I've seen a couple of examples online. They look good. Do they look as good as the hard plastic kits that I've seen? Maybe not, but let's give it a try. I think 3D printing is the way. I think it is the way of the future for minis.
They did, I know, with the previous edition, the current edition of War Machine. It's not gone yet, but they went through a stage.
It's dead. It's dead now.
Leave it. But they went through a stage of producing hard plastic warjacks, and those kits were really nice. And I remember thinking, it's not quite GW standard. GW, you'd have to go a long way to beat their quality. They are sort of the Citadel are the masters of making really nice models. There's one thing I will say for Age of Sigmar: some of those models I've seen for that are phenomenal. They are second to none in terms of detail. But I thought those were quite nice. But then clearly something broke down in the, I don't know, what was a supply chain or something else, and they kind of stopped making those. And if you remember, they made that kind of soft plastic range for a while. You got them in the starter sets, and they were pretty ghastly.
The weird thing is, Guild Ball did a similar thing, though, didn't they? Guild Ball did a similar thing, and I know that's gone by the way, and that's another bone of contention. That's my Age of Sigmar. I resent that. Okay, but let's not go into that. But they started with metal miniatures. They're fantastic. They did some resin reeds, which were too fragile. They weren't very good. Then they did soft plastic and stuff. And they tried different methods. The only thing I would say about Privateer Press is they have this weird thing, or they did in the hard plastic kits, that you get these beautiful hard plastic kits, fantastic. Avatar of Menoth was one of my favourite, is fantastic. And then they'd give you, the odd bit would be metal, and it would be a bit that was dangling on by some tiny little contact point. And you're like, why would you attach a really heavy metal bit via this tiny small contact point on this plastic kit? And they would. It's like the kind of drapes that hung off this model were metal, and it's like, that's such a weird design decision. It made it really hard to assemble these kits without pinning them, and that's another advanced technique. I know that was some feedback about their
Warcaster game, was they had these new models and there was a whole load of metal involved in them, and they've got these like spindly little connectors and like a massive cannon hanging off it. And again, for new people, you're then expected to know how to pin things.
Yeah, I still don't pin anything. If I need anything pinned, I get Glenn to do it. That's basically it. Does it look complicated? Yeah, let's call Glenn. Okay, because he'll pin it.
He knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing with the pin drill, and so. But I'm not up on that. And yet you say I'm the target, with magnetization and things like that. But yeah, it's another step. It just makes it more difficult.
One thing I'd say that's interesting about their production quality, I remember when Citadel first released contrast paints, and for those of you not familiar, contrast paints are kind of these witchcraft paints that Games Workshop made, that if you want your army to be sort of table ready, you spend a few minutes with these, splash on some paint, and it does some magic to make your model look glorious. And I know that my son, he put some Warhammer 40k miniatures together. He's not into painting by any stretch of the imagination, but his Space Wolf Terminators looked amazing because with these magic paints. I tried using contrast paints on some War Machine models, and they don't look as good as when you use it on Citadel models. And I think it's just the flaws in the sculpting begin to come out. And when you say, Jay, that you've seen models online for the 3D printing, and if they look good, but are they as good as the old ones? And it's the old ones I've done the painting with. Is that a step backwards? Who knows? It may be that as the technology gets more mature, as they get more familiar with it, it'll become better. I know I've seen ones online and they look okay. I don't like one thing I don't like is that they're almost changing the aesthetic with some of it. Like War Machine always had this fantasy industrial vibe to it. Like the army I play, my soldiers are a mix of World War One soldiers and people who look like they're cosplaying Regency fancy dress with their tricon hats and their ruffly coats. But it gives it a very distinctive vibe. Likewise, Jason's are all mad religious fanatics swanning about with pauldrons that would put Space Marines to shame. But a lot of the newer models that they've shown as previews, it all looks a bit Warhammer 40k. like my faction, everyone's got these lightning rifles. That used to be a niche part of the faction. Now everyone's wearing power armor and carrying plasma guns, for lack of a better term. And I wonder whether they're leaning into that to try and get people to come in because it looks a bit more like another game that's familiar and popular. Who knows? Anyway, speaking of other games that are popular, the other thing we were going to talk about is that Games Workshop have released a Horus Heresy set. Now, for those of you unaware, Horus Heresy, it's a period of history in Warhammer 40k. It's actually set in the 31st millennium, so it's Warhammer 30k. And previously this was an offshoot by a company called Forge World that Games Workshop used to make lovely resin models that are horrendously expensive. But they produced a rule set for Horus Heresy. It was based on 40k 7th edition. In fact, it was 7th edition for a while, and as 40k moved on, they kept with this rule set. And Games Workshop have now taken this in-house and are releasing models for it. They've released the new rule set, which is, if you like, 7.5. It's 7th edition cleaned up, and they're releasing various books, etc. Now, I loved when they came out with this. Horus Heresy is my favourite part of 40k lore. I love the models. It's set in an earlier time. It's got a different look. What are your guys' feelings on it, both in terms of are you excited about it, but also why do you think GW have started leaning into this?
That is a great question. I think there's a lot of nostalgia for it. Having been in that scene for a few years now, it was kind of like your sort of like old school neckbeard, sort of like this is where the adults go to play type of game. You know, the system is a little hard. The 7th ed is not nearly as noob friendly as the newer ones is. It is a lot more expensive, to your point, because it was almost all resin. So it was very much more, higher price point, much higher barrier of entry. It's not the kind of game you're gonna, see in a GW store and play with the little kids, right? You're not going to be selling them on the crazy expensive price point, or people wanting like Warlord Titans. We're talking middle class and above people buying this game. And it was a much more hardcore game, much smaller niche audience. So my guess is they are trying to pull it mainstream because they want to get it to a wider audience, because there's a lot of plus it's all Space Marines, and Space Marines, let's be clear, are their number one faction, right? Well, almost all, right? They do have compared to 40k, which has many, many, many factions that are not human based, that are not Space Marines. We mentioned Eldar earlier. You have Orcs. You have Chaos, you have Tau, you have a lot of different factions, right? Horus Heresy, the background and lore for that very briefly is about a civil war, and it's mostly fought between Space Marine chapters, right? So you've got two sides. You've got the loyalists, and then you've got the traitors. So you can basically release a set like they did with the Beaky Marines we talked about, and a couple of that, and you can use those Marines for any one of these 18 chapters and just paint it in your paint scheme, right? And they all have slightly different rules, and it's in an earlier stage of the game whereby, if you look at the evolution of all those different chapters now, they all have very distinct model ranges because they've evolved. So your Blood Angels look like this, and your Space Wolves look like that. But in Horus Heresy, they were much more homogenous with little bits of flair. So there's a lot of economies of scale of them doing plastic with this now, and it is, again, their number one faction. So like everybody plays Space Marines, and it's a cliche almost. You're almost always going to have a bunch of Space Marine players. So I think it really is about just bringing the game mainstream, because there's a lot of interest in Space Marines because it is their mainstream and they can sell a lot of it. And plus, it also has you can use those miniatures in 40k too. It's like, I buy a Horus Heresy box set, everything in there is cross compatible with 40k new edition right now, has rules, and they're beautiful minis. So it's kind of like you have your cake and eat it, right? You can play both systems.
Does Privateer Press need a War Machine 30k?
I think you're right though, Steve. I thought that as well when I saw the set that came out. My initial thought was they've been very clever here, because I think the Horus Heresy players are like, wow, we're being acknowledged as being part of the mainstream, but also people who play 40k and just want slightly older looking models, they can buy. And to be honest, the box set is incredible value. It's more expensive than normal, but you get, I think you alluded to earlier, more or less two mini forces you can use, or one large army that you can use out of the box. And the fact you can play across both the systems is a genius move on their part, because you're going to get people to come into 40k, and when they're in 40k, of course they're going to do I can pick up a combat patrol box for $100. I might give Orcs a try, or I might give Eldar a try.
Yeah, and I'm not going to object, because my old second-hand Beaky Marines are now worth more. Fantastic. And if anybody's interested, let me know. I can dig them out of storage. I'm sure I've got a few things there. Old school, like metal dreadnoughts, the first Rhino kit, all there. Terrible. Probably not worth anything.
Yeah, it's totally nostalgia. Like the fact that they've this box set just brings back it just evokes that original. The box set number is RTB01. That's what you like. All the old school 40k grognards will talk about is your RTB01 Space Marines box. Which we all said we had, right? So even the poses are very similar. Now, granted, they've upscaled the miniatures and they're absolutely freaking beautiful now. But they evoke the memory because of the poses and the guns. Like, if you look at some of the I don't know if that original box set comes with a missile launcher mini, but certainly the upgrade sprues come with a missile. And they've moved away from the missile launcher design aesthetic for years. And they bring back this old school, like 1980s. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like a beautiful old school 40k missile launcher that just evokes those old memories. They're totally leaning in this nostalgia, and I applaud them for it because I love all that crap. It's great. And honestly, like, if I had time, it's not even a money thing for me. It's just a time thing. I don't have time to go dig into Horus Heresy or even play heavyweight. My mini games right now move more towards skirmish, which we haven't really talked about the skirmish side of things at all yet. But I've moved more towards smaller scale skirmish games rather than going larger scale, which Horus Heresy is kind of it's moving more towards a higher scale, hundreds of miniatures, mass combat than even 40k is to a degree. Because you move to Horus Heresy and you start to get into this gateway drug of, well, I can buy Titan now, and I can be playing these massive battles. And Titans you can play in 40k too, but they were all part of and built for the original Horus Heresy line. And you just go down this rabbit hole of bigger and bigger forces. It's pretty crazy.
It is definitely reminiscing, because even now I'm tempted to dig them out and give it a go again. Do you know what I mean? It just feels good. So maybe I might.
Well, you mentioned, Steve, that it's kind of genius packaging it up as an all Space Marine extravaganza, because unlike with 40k, where if you want to play Death Guards, you have to buy separate models that you can't use if you want to play World Eaters, for example. Whereas with this set, you just take the models and paint them in the colour of the Legion that you want to play. One of the really clever things they have is you can order Legion-specific like helmets or shoulder pads, which are, comparatively speaking, cheap purchases. Unlike those missile launchers you mentioned, you can buy an upgrade kit. It's $15, and you get a bunch of missile launchers or old school looking weapons that you can then put on your guys and make them into your guys. And they have Legion specific headwear and pauldrons, and it just looks better, and it becomes then more a hobby thing, that you're suddenly selling people on the hobby and constructing it to look like you would want it. And that's, for a company that's famed for pricey purchases, that's a really good way to get people in, is to say, yeah, you can buy this set, but look, if you bought these extra things, these guys can be your guys. And then you're really leaning into the customization and making it look like something that you own.
I will give GW credit where credit is due. They have done more for getting new people in the hobby in terms of like focusing on lower price points, making smart box set choices for getting people in the game in the last 5 5-7 years than they did for years earlier. Like, so many smart decisions. This Horus Heresy is just the latest example of it, but like, you just look at what they've done with the last 2 editions of both of their main games, and look at how they've made smaller boxes, simpler rule sets. You're able to get in at the lowest price points you've ever gotten. You're still getting the really good quality miniatures, and they're like, I mean, I don't want to derail from Horus Heresy, but let's talk about for the last edition of 40K. They have 3 different box sets of different scales depending on how much money you want to spend, and all 3 of them come with the same basic kits in some ways, some different permutation that have 2 forces, and so you can jump in at any one of those levels. And then for the pro hobbyists like you and me, before all those came out, they came out with that. This is the marquee box set. That's the $200 that came with these massive forces, kind of like the Horus Heresy one, but with 2 different. Like the latest one was Space Marines and Necrons, so it was called the Indomitus box, right? So you can go all the way up to there for the pro hobbyists who just want to get those new sprues first, and then they do the mass-produced starter ones, which are smaller sets of those, along with a little bit of terrain, easier to consume rules. Credit where credit's due. It's made getting into the hobby easier than it's ever been.
Yeah, I think with the Horus Heresy set as well, it's pretty much, I think, a loss leader for them in terms of what you get in there. But in terms of the return and getting people involved, I mean, in that box you get it's like 40 Space Marines, 10 Terminators, a Dreadnought, 2 character models and a tank, plus a massive hardback rule book and associated gubbins to stick down the table. I'm pretty sure for the price point that it is, they are making a loss on that. But for the follow-up purchases, they're getting people in there. And to your point, Steve, about the boxes for 40k, I got my son a 40k box a couple of years ago, and it's the first time I'd been in 40k for a while, out with the Forge World Horus Heresy stuff. And I was blown away by what you got for the price. The miniatures are an incredible quality, and it seems to be balanced correctly in terms of you could set up these 2 things and, shoot each other across the table, and you're immediately like, I need more stuff, because that was a really good experience with what they provided out of the box. Where can I get more things? And of course, the first thing the rulebook's got is like, and if you want more stuff, here's where you go. And I think as well, the fact they've put all the rules on their app, so for free you can get the 40k rules and just get up and running. That's a biggie. They obviously have, you need to buy a codex to find out what you guys can do, but they're just making it easier for people to get started. And I mentioned there those combat patrol sets they do for 40k, which I think there was like $120, and it's in 40k you have sort of encounter levels, and it's like the smallest level, I think, encounter level that you can have, but it's an army you can use straight away to play another one of a similar size. So if you had 2 people who wanted to get started, you buy 2 of those boxes, you're good to go.
What's that, $240?
Yeah.
Less than the 1 box for War Machine. Oh, sorry, just slightly more than the War box.
But Steve, you mentioned skirmish games, and again in our prep for this, we said we were going to talk about that. You're obviously very familiar with that. Do you want to give a feeling on why you are getting more into skirmish games? Because they're becoming more and more popular.
I mean, it's a time thing, right? I mean, it could be a money thing too for certain individuals, but really the skirmish games are, I mean, we'll talk about the GW first, but by no means are they the only skirmish games that I either like or are on the market, because there's a lot of them, and there is a renaissance for skirmish games out there. So really, if we're talking about skirmish, we're talking about usually lower model count, very relatively speaking, cheap to get into than spending hundreds of dollars to get a full army. So you can get a force put together quickly, because you're talking usually between 5 to 10 miniatures, right? That you can get, assembled. It's not too daunting to get in and paint them, even because if you think about it, I mean, you guys can joke all you want about not fielding any gray miniatures, but if you have to paint 100 miniatures before you can play a game, and all you want to do is play, you're probably not playing that game. And you're losing hobbyists right there if you have a hard mandate. So I think everybody should make that decision for themselves, and legitimately so, right? But that is incredibly daunting with some of these horde armies in a larger scale game to try and get like an Orc force or an Imperial Guard force on the table. Like those are ridiculously large armies. So with these skirmish games, especially with say like 40k, the current game is called Kill Team. They've been trying to iterate on producing a smaller scale 40k, universe game for years and years, and it's always been called Kill Team, right? They've been trying this for like 10, 15 years, and they have finally, I think, gotten the recipe down whereby you can buy these box sets that will have 2 teams, a bunch of terrain. It fits on a smaller table, so you can play it on your dining room table without needing, a 6x4 table, or on a table at work. It's designed and balanced to play in an hour or less, so you can fit it in lunchtime. And you get to play, again, it's like 5 to 10 miniatures, and you get to try different forces. Like, it's much less of a barrier for entry. Even the combat patrol you just mentioned, that's still a fairly big investment just to try out a force to understand how they play, right? I'm willing to do it, but a lot of people probably aren't. You get to play with the aesthetic. So, like, say I do this a lot with these. I want to try Elder from an aesthetic perspective. I want to assemble them. I want to try and paint them. Look at paint schemes. That is a great way from the hobby perspective to get people into the game to try out new things, because there's a very low barrier for entry. And if you don't like it, it's like, well, I haven't spent hundreds of dollars. Okay, put them to the sides, try something else, right? So it does come to low model count, simplified systems, quick and easy to play, get in and out. And really, like I said, for me, it's a matter of time and commitment. And, I don't have time to go commit like half an afternoon to go play a 2,000 point army most of the time these days. I'd love to, but I don't, right? I have other priorities. So if I want to get my sort of fix in of both hobby and gaming for this with miniatures, that the skirmish games really hit the sweet spot. So Kill Team is great for that because they have all the same factions, and they're here's what's even cooler about what the GW is doing to innovate right now. They're not just saying, hey, play with the miniatures you already got. You can do that, right? They're introducing new miniatures, and they're taking advantage of the fact that I don't have to make an entire army of these miniatures. I can make a small number of like a particular sub-faction or whatever, because I don't have to worry about, well, I got to create tanks or fast attack or leaders or heroes. I just create like a single box with 10 miniatures with a bunch of different kit combinations, and all of a sudden we've increased the lore of the game, and people love this stuff. They've done this multiple times with Kill Team. The latest one that they're doing, they've done Eldar Corsairs, which they haven't released an Eldar Corsairs kit in 20 years, right? Beautiful new Eldar Corsairs kit. They did a new Sisters of Battle Initiate set. They did for the previous edition of Kill Team that came out a couple of years ago. They did Rogue Trader Kill Team with just like stuff that's like not your normal stuff. Like they have like a Cyber Mastiff in it, right? So all sorts of like cool niche miniatures that are like, this is 40k, but it's not your vanilla 40k. It's cool new stuff. So it gives them the opportunity to do that, and they've done that with Warcry as well, which is their Age of Sigmar skirmish game. Again, same thing, really tight gameplay, RLS. They've actually shared rules innovations with it a little bit, and just as a much lower barrier for entry, and they keep doing that. And that's one of the things I love about it, is we get new miniatures that are not just vanilla parts of their main forces. They can play as allies, and they can play in these forces if you want to bring them into like the mainstream. For example, I'll give you another example, like the Sisters of Battle, like those initiates, you can bring those into your Sisters of Battle, and you can buy squads of 10 of them and just bring them in and play them in 40k. So that you can do the same thing with any of the forces with Warcry. And like honestly, like if you look at Chaos right now in Age of Sigmar, a big chunk of the Chaos Undivided force on Age of Sigmar right now, which is your old school sort of Chaos Warriors first, from if you're talking Modern Fantasy Battle, a big chunk of their army list now is made up of the stuff that was introduced in Warcry. And they're all these individual small, like Chaos Undivided, hey, I'm these dudes from a swamp, and I don't know what Nurgle is, but I know the latest kit they're releasing is, we worship Lord Leech, right? Because we don't know about Nurgle, but we just know that there's this god thing that we worship, and so they've got their own slightly different flavor of Nurgle that's not Nurgly, but Nurgle-esque. So you're getting all this type of stuff there. So like I said, they're innovating in that area, and I could talk for days about this stuff because as you could tell, I'm super passionate about it. But yeah, so those two, and then things like the stuff that Atomic Mass Games is doing with Marvel Crisis Protocol, right? If you go in and look at all the range they've done for Marvel Crisis Protocol, for Marvel Comics nerds like me, some of the best quality sculpts you've seen. Like, I know you've got like the WizKids and stuff like that. If you've been collecting WizKids, minis for years, they're kind of low quality, kind of not good miniatures. At least back in the day they weren't, right? We're talking multi-part GW level quality miniatures for all your favorite Marvel heroes. And the game is really tight. And again, it falls into the same category of really tight, play on lunchtime, super fun, super low cost barrier for entry compared to a large game. And there are multiple games going in that direction as well. And I just love it. I love that I can get into a game and try something new without needing to jump all the way to like a 2,000-point army, or even Escalation. I mean, Escalation for 40k is great and all, but it's still a barrier for entry to a degree to get a force on the table. And then there's always that pressure. Well, I got to put another army. I got another squad ready for the next week, right? That's a lot of pressure. The skirmish games are fixed size, right? You don't have to keep growing it. You could buy new ones to change it up, to change up your force if you want to add a new miniature here and there, or tweak or whatever. But by and large, it's still 5 to 10 miniatures the whole time.
Yeah, and that's similar to what Jason and I were talking about at the beginning with the War Machine Journeyman League. The initial battle box games you played were like these skirmish games. You had maybe 4 or 5 models on the table. You had the basics of mechanics, and the game would be over quickly. One thing that, going back to the time aspect, the War Machine has going for it, and Jason might disagree because I know he hates it, but in competitive games of War Machine, you play on a clock.
I'm good at clock now.
You're good at clock now?
I'm good at clock now. I hated it as
the way it works is it's like a chess clock. When it's your turn, you start your clock and it starts spinning, and then when your opponent goes, you stop the clock, your opponent goes. One of the most funny things you could always do with Jason is if he was responding to something you did and he went to pick up his model so the clock flips over to him, just go, and you'd see like, what? Why are you making that noise? What are you doing? Oh, your clock's running down, Jason. Ah!
I'm much better with it now. I've even built armies specifically so that they actually operate under a clock better, so less models. So Iain, sold War Machine to me as a skirmish game. Okay, you don't need a lot of minis, and certainly when we started playing, that was true. But it seems to be that every time you play outside of a friendly on your tabletop competition, it's what they call 75 points. It's steamroller. And by the time you add in freebies from your theme and the Warcaster points, there was a lot of models on the table. I have no problem fielding that amount of models, but it's a barrier to entry, as you say, and it takes time. Admittedly, even if that is actually part of the constraints of the game as well. It's one of the reasons, I've already mentioned Guild Ball once tonight, it's one of the reasons I love Guild Ball, was the fact that I could go out and buy a team and it would come complete, but there were extra ones, but you only fielded a certain number of players. So, very much like you were saying, Steve, you could change it up and swap them out, but you never grew the team. It was always, did you sacrifice the fast winger for the big brick in the centre of midfield, or vice versa, and so forth. And that was good. So I was I'm going to harp on till the day I die about how upset I am that game was killed off by Steam Forge Games. But
me too.
Yeah.
Would you like some space to talk about it, Jason?
I would probably need a safe space to talk about it.
Go on, talk about it now. This is a safe space.
No, it's not. It's not. But recently been talking with another friend of mine, my replacement Scottish friend, who now that Iain fled to the States, I had a vacancy for a Scottish friend. So Rob Bell has been trying to convince me to play Malifaux, and I kind of had a look at the minis, and there's some really cool minis in there. And I know what I'm like. It's very similar to say about playing the Menoth for War Machine. Is I tend to then go all in. So I've looked at a couple of factions. I'm looking at Neverborn at the moment, and I'm pretty much sure that when I get my hobby room up and working, I'll be placing an order for everything with a nightmare keyword, because I just like the look of those models, and they're just going to be fun to paint and hopefully fun to play. But that's the skirmish aspect, I think, is so important. I know when I was a kid, I looked at these massive tables with 3D terrain, 3D models, beautifully painted, and that's what got me into it. But I haven't got the time to do that anymore. So the smaller games give me most of the hit without, a lot less of the money, a lot less of the time, most of the hit. So as a junkie for tabletop games, that hits the spot for me.
Yeah, I know what you mean about that. One of the things that I found with War Machine that almost put me off at times was when you played a competitive game of War Machine, it was always 2D terrain, because the competitive aspect of it was always about precision measuring. Literally, I've lost a game before because I've had something that was like a fraction of an inch away from where it should be. And if you play the War Machine tournament, people will religiously measure.
It is cutthroat.
It is brutal.
But that's good about it. Don't get me wrong. It's not.
It is good, but it looks naff on the table. I love a table with 3D terrain where...
Yeah, me too.
And that's what gets, similar to what you said, that's what gets new people in. When people walk past Games Workshop, there's a reason they've got those huge cabinets full of lovely painted miniatures in the window. There's a reason they've got dioramas in there. And there's a reason when you go in, they've got a massive table set up with all the terrain and the models on it, because people are like, wow, this looks amazing. I could be doing that. Whereas if it's a table with 2D terrain, it's like, it was. I mean, I've seen it in War Machine tournaments before, where you get a certain breed of competitive player that will just put the models together, they never paint it. And you see this table with 2D terrain, and these models are a mix of grey plastic and metal stuck on, and they look dreadful.
But Steve is right. I might be, fervent in my desire that I will field nothing that is unpainted, but I don't place any restrictions on my opponent. That's not, but there's nothing better than two fully painted armies, 3D terrain, clashing out. I mean, I'm sure I should get out more. There probably is something better, but in my head, that's the thing, right? I want to see, gargantuan dracodiles swarming across the table to be, and crushing through forests and things like that, and buildings getting in the way and things. It's just that I've splurged some money just a little bit before I left the UK, and I've only got to use it once. But I got some custom made 3D terrain from a company called Two Sheds Fred, who are available on Facebook, and can't fault them. Absolutely fantastic. And I got a huge fort made for my Idrians, and like a desert village, and I've only used it once, but when I put it out, it looked great. And again, going back to my new Scottish friend Rob, he's now spending loads of money on terrain for his Malifaux setup. So he's got like railway setups and saloons and Western kind of stuff going on. And I can't wait to see it on a table in anger, because it will look amazing, and that's where I'm at.
Well, you remember, Jason, that time we played, I had the Citadel Realm of Battle board.
Yeah.
And I flocked that thing and painted it. And we had a game of 40k on your dining room table with this setup and a whole bunch of terrain. And it just looked brilliant.
It looks great.
It just looks fantastic. It's probably not the best way to accurately measure, because models slide down hills and all sorts of other nonsense.
And they slide down the hill. It's not good.
Yeah, but it looks fantastic. And again, for getting people into the hobby, there's nothing that's a more visually appealing advert for the game than that. And I should say, if people don't want to paint minis, that's fine. I'm not judging people for that. I just don't think
he is. He's judging
great.
You people. That's what he does.
Not judging people. I just don't think it looks.
I mean, you're not wrong. Like, I may not have time to paint minis, and honestly, like, I would never judge someone who doesn't want to participate in the different aspects of the hobby, because there are obviously three aspects that are kind of pitched as like, not everyone plays in all three of them. There's the collecting aspect, there's the hobby aspect, and then there's the playing aspect, right? Some people just want to play the game. They want to put as least effort as possible, because they're focused on just wanting to play a fun, compelling war game, right? Mm-hmm. They're sometimes forced to be getting to tournaments. They're like at tournament level. If you're going to play in tournament, yes, they want especially places like they're sponsored by places like GW, right? They want to have a basic painting standard, because they want to be able to advertise it. They want to be able to show, look, here our painted armies playing together and with cool terrain, right? Mm-hmm. But for your friendly local gaming store or just friendly games with your friends as you're learning the game, to me, all bets are off. It's like if you've literally just threw your minis together, don't care. If you want to play a proxies, as long as we understand what's going on, don't care, right? I want to play a game with you and just learn the system or just have a goofy old time and have fun. But people love hobbies. Like people love the hobby aspect of it. I have friends who are professional painters, and they do it as their job, full time. They get a kick out of it, and they're able to make a living off of it.
Yeah.
And I love that aspect of the hobby too. I wish I was better at it, and I wish I had the patience for it. But for some people, that is the only thing they do. They never play the game. They just collect the beautiful miniatures, paint them up, and showcase them. And that still is valid of a part of the hobby too. So it's definitely interesting. It has those different facets, and it makes it super compelling to me that you can enjoy the hobby as part of that.
I think that's true. There's a certain part of it, I think, again, going back to the Journeyman League, that you got extra points in your league score if you painted your models, but there was nothing to say, even in this official tournament, that you couldn't field unpainted models. If you wanted to just put your models together and use them as a piece on the table, you had to assemble it. You couldn't just stick a base down and say, oh, by the way, that's my Warcaster. You had to assemble it. But if you wanted to play a grey unpainted model, you could. And again, that's fine. I would rather play against someone and get a game than go, well, I'm not playing you because you don't paint your models. And I am definitely not a good painter by any means. I just like seeing a sort of uniform swathe of colour. Well, I will say, Jason will empathise with this. For my War Machine army, I probably picked the one army with the worst studio colour scheme. I have no imagination. I will paint the colours that are on the box, and Signar's army colours are blue, which is fine. White and yellow. White and yellow are the two single worst colours to paint. You need to put about 90 coats on to look anything other than muted. And your army's entirely white, isn't it, Jason?
Pretty much, yeah. I've gone through more white paint than I can. It's just bad. But contrast paint's very good.
The new ones, the new really high contrast white spray they have, the new shade formulations they have, and the new yellows for contrast that just came out. That will change your world when it comes to those.
It's too
because
late.
They understand.
I've already done it. I've learned the hard way. Why did this thing not arrive 2 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it was?
They've been lauded for the new yellows that just came out last month. It's some of the best yellow paints that have ever been made. And
yellow is
so goddamn good.
Yeah, yellow's horrible. I saw a guy losing his mind on YouTube about the new yellow. He's got a whole Imperial Fists chapter who are all yellow. And he's like, it makes my life so much easier to put this together. As soon as they do Sons of Horus green in contrast, I'm going to buy a bucket load of that, because that's all I'm painting at the moment is little green.
Wouldn't surprise me if there's already is one out of the new range. It's 25 new paints, and I haven't bought all of them, but there's some really nice ones, and wouldn't surprise me if there's one that fits your bill. And the new shades are so good too, right? In a lot of ways, they're better than the old shades. They pull better.
So here's what I was going to say. We're coming up to time, but there is one thing that we do have to talk about, and that is Citadel shade paints, because I think everyone here will agree that Nuln Oil and Agarax Earthshade
talent in a jar.
Painting in easy mode.
It is.
I think, was it you, Jason, I showed when you were talking about painting, and I showed you Nuln Oil for the first time? You're like, oh my god, I would have won a golden demon with this back in the 80s.
Yeah, it's literally, it's just talent in a jar. I don't understand. It's sorcery. I don't know if they produced it in the 13th century, we'd have burned them at the stake. I'm telling you, it's glorious. The only problem is it doesn't really work too well with white. I know, I tried a lot, but yeah.
You want Seraphim Sepia for that?
I had that, I tried that as well. But I did this brownie white stuff, I'm not too fan of. Yeah, the new contrast grey white, that's good.
Yeah. The new grey white shade that they did in really contrast, It's really nice too.
I think the last few miniatures I did, I used that as a base, and it was so much better, so much easier. Because as soon as you put Nuln Oil, best will in the world, it starts to look dirty. And I kind of, for some of my Warjacks, I was okay with that because they're supposed to be steam powered, so having a bit of soot and a bit of grime kind of fits the aesthetic anyway. So slap it on. But some of the other stuff not so easy. But the new stuff, it's exceptional. It's really good.
It's actually one thing I'm surprised Privateer Press haven't pushed more is their paint range, because Privateer, outside of its own community, sometimes it's quite a toxic reputation because it's all these competitive people. I mean, years ago in Mark II, they used to have a part of the rulebook called Page 5 that has been just slated now because it's smacks of misogyny. It's like, play like you've got a pair, and it's all very gung-ho, locker room bros slapping each other on the back type thing. But the one thing that does have a good write-up out with the community is their paints, because Privateer Press's paints require very little thinning. A lot of Citadel paints, I'm constantly putting medium in there to thin it down. Privateer Press paints, you don't need to. They're really a really nice formula. There's a good range of colours. And I'm surprised they've not pushed that more as part of the new edition to get people in, like, hey, look at all the great paints we've got. But they've not really done that.
They don't put even a set of paints in the starter set or anything, do they?
Don't.
Because that would be logical, right? Slam in a Menoth white, Signar blue, Kadar red, whatever it is, and at least get your paints out there in front of people. People use them, go, nah, it's rubbish, I prefer Citadel, or wow, these are great, I'll buy these in future. And it wouldn't cost them a huge amount. I wouldn't.
No, because it's already there, and they don't even do sets of paints. Like with GW, you can buy paint sets like your Space Marine starter set.
They did. There was a Protector of Menoth set.
Was it?
Of paints? Yeah.
Okay.
And it had the sort of bone white colour. Yeah, there you go. Fake news. I don't know how long ago, whether it still continued, but I remember there being like a Menoth paint set. I'm assuming there were others, but there is only one true lawgiver, and that's the only person I care about.
And on that note, for Jason's fanaticism takes over, we will call this podcast done. Thanks again, chaps, for joining. A pleasure to talk about something a little bit different for a change. Any closing thoughts before we go? Anything you would, other than what we've talked about, that you try and sell people on? Or
I wouldn't try and sell anybody, but isn't it really cool to see Steve really enthused and passionate about something? I mean, that was fantastic. So that was good. I think the only thing I'd like to mention as an aside is finally got my IKRPG Kickstarter, the Borderlands and Beyond set. Very nice. Came with a few miniatures. Fancy that. Privateer Press do miniatures. So I've now got a small team of Iosians. So the kind of retribution of Sarah? I don't know. The Elven faction in
who have all been invalidated apart.
Who've all been invalidated, but of course that
edition
arrived just the other way. Yeah, exactly. So it's a bit confusing, but that looks nice. Quite happy with that. It's kind of new thing that arrived through the post and is physical, and I can touch it. It's a book
tangible
and stuff. It's lovely.
Definitely in the theme. One of the only things I'm looking forward to right now is the new Kill Team box that's coming out pretty soon. That I will be pre-ordering, which is. It's kind of a Space Hulk theme. This one they're going with.
Oh, cool!
I love that game. That was such a good game.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that, but they're going boarding and boarding actions and stuff. So that'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to getting a hold of that.
Yeah, Space Hulk was another great example of how 3D-ness helps with something. You could have made Space Hulk with just cardboard counters, but they made a box full of miniatures and the corridor pieces, and it looked absolutely fantastic. In terms of me for minis, I am just going to be painting loads and loads of Sons of Horus. I've said I am not going to be getting any more until I have gone through my pile of shame, of which I was quite astounded by how much I had. I'm like, this is terrible. I put up on Twitter, I found the other day, I actually had a Forge World Horus miniature that I'd bought years ago. I just started and dumped in a box somewhere, and I was quite ashamed by that. So I was like, no, I must paint this. And I did. So I'm going to paint a bunch of goods for him.
Looks very good.
Yeah, it's all right. It's an impressive miniature. The paint job could be better, but I need now a mere 2,400 worth of troops to go alongside him. So I've painted 5 dudes in a dreadnought. So I'm slowly on my way. Anyway, gents, thanks again for joining us, and we will see you on the next podcast. And that was our Miniature Wargaming Roundtable. Or should I say, that was part 1 of our Miniature Wargaming Roundtable. Turns out once we finished recording, we realised we had a whole load of other things that we wanted to talk about, which we never got round to. So we're going to make a part 2. Lucky you, gentle listener. We are a monthly-ish podcast about the history of RPGs. We have got many more of these roundtables up there, along with history episodes, actual plays, reviews, and other assorted nonsense like this episode. If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter, you can find us at Save Podcast. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for Roll to Save. And if you want to email us, you can get us at roll.2.save.pod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll tune in next time.